APT Florence, Enit Italia, Community of Florence, Lufthansa Airlines, Altair-TV, and New Acropolis presents Florence, the 15th century. A sublime miracle appeared in a magnificent town on the Arno. The greatest doctrines of antiquity and the ideas of philosophers belonging to different historical epochs and cultures rose from non-existence. Within a short while, they caused a revolutionary change in people's minds, in their vision of life. These revived ideas and thoughts were referred to and studied thoroughly. People turned them into the foundation of their changing world outlook. People spoke about the immortal nature of the soul again, asking the eternal questions. Who am I? Where do I come from? Where do I go? Florence, the 15th century. The world had changed. After hundreds of years of a prolonged and severe medieval era, at one time and place, a pleiad of eminent people got together, inspiring each other's creativity. There appeared new models of human existence, as well as great works forestalling the epoch for many centuries. If our contemporaries praised us to the skies, they understood little of us. In our century, we were pilgrims from other times and heralds of the future. No one recognized us. A distant star guided us through our incarnations. We descended so that to show the great law of the revival. Florence, the Renaissance star. Humanity went through more than one revival. Usually this time of renovation, similar to spring, touched upon all aspects of an individual's life. There was always something natural in the way it revealed itself. The revival used to come every time a particular civilization or culture lived through the most difficult period of its history, the times of chaos and recession. Here it is worth remembering the time of Egypt's pharaoh Tutankhamun, 14th century BC, marked by the return to ancient traditions. Or the Golden Age of Pericles in Greek Athens, the 5th century BC. Or the 2nd century AD, the time when ancient Rome was under the rule of emperors, whom we consider philosophers, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. Such historic periods were never enduring, but they always gave a powerful spur to the development for many centuries to follow. The same was true for the Renaissance, initially conceived in Italy, which later on spread all over Europe. For us, this era seems to be the closest and most comprehensible in both terms, time and traces left. Nowadays, these traces have turned into the common property of mankind. Getting back to the beginnings of that remarkable time, getting back to its mysteries and laws, we make our way to Florence, the city recognized as the cradle of the Renaissance. It It looks as if there was nothing accidental in the history of the city. The legend says that in 1000 BC, in Fiesole, on a flank of one of the hills surrounding Florence, ancient Etruscans settled. Etruscan priests had followed divine signs indicating the place for a new settlement. Later on, in the times of Julius Caesar, here was the placement of a Roman military camp. The Romans chose the goddess of spring and flowers, Flora, as their patroness, and called the town Florentia, which means blossoming. So beautiful it was all around. For the Romans, Flora was more than just the goddess of spring. She was a symbol of everlasting return to life and renovation of all the existent, the nature, the human being, the history. Just as nature starts blossoming as soon as the spring comes, the human soul, they believed, awakes to the spiritual life as soon as love touches upon it. The Romans perceived this knowledge with ancient myths and legends. It helped them to live in harmony with nature, with the divine. The history of medieval Florence differed little from other European towns. Endless wars, governmental shifts and political intrigues were a common thing. In the evenings, narrow streets used to become quickly deserted. Severe fires happened from time to time. Guelphs and Ghibellines, seething with anger, barricaded themselves in their medieval towers. The struggle for influence between these political parties didn't have mercy even upon the greatest son of Florence, Dante. The fathers of the town exiled him. Later on, being dazzled by the poet's glory, they invited him to come back on the condition he confessed to his delusions. The expatriate's wrathful answer was, "This is not the way Dante will return home. Your forgiveness doesn't deserve such humiliation. My shelter and protection is my honor. Can't I contemplate the skies and stars anywhere?" The time was harsh. Wars, epidemics, constant threat of starvation. There was hardly anything to bode the brilliance of humanism ideas. Masterpieces of painting and sculpture, great geographic discoveries. At the same time, there wasn't a sign of the forthcoming severe prosecution of dissidents and fires of the Inquisition, which were accompanied by ignorance and the indifference of ordinary people. On the verge of the 15th century, Europe seemed frozen in view of the era of great contrasts and the struggle for light in people's hearts and minds. Submissive folk, all terror-stricken, keep silent, making no complaint. But you, O skylight, deep love fire, please urge the truth from guiltless death, to rise again and live amongst them, as none will feel and live in peace, should not the truth be born anew. From the deepest darkness springs the light. As if in support of this saying, in 1434 a new governor of Florence assumed power. His name was Cosimo Medici. The severity and finesse of the largest European bank leader and the practicality of a politician went well together with generosity and nobility. After 300 years of civil war, Cosimo managed to restore peace and order in the city. He favored and encouraged the arts. Grateful citizens called him just Pater Patria, which means father of the fatherland. None other but Cosimo Medici made a determined step forward towards the times that were later on called the Renaissance. The year 1439. On Cosimo's initiative, the Ecumenical Council, aimed at reuniting the Orthodox and Catholic churches, took place in Florence. For a period of 6 months, Florence turned into the center of international life. Among numerous delegates from the East and the West, there was one from distant Moscow. Procession of the Magi, a fresco by the Florentine painter Benozzo Gozzoli, situated in the chapel at the Palace of Medici, is considered to be the allegoric picture of the 1439 Council. Among the procession participants, we recognize real historical figures, in particular Cosimo Medici, his great son Lorenzo il Magnifico, Byzantine Emperor Joan Palaiolog. Under the vaulting of the Gothic temple Santa Maria Novella, met the council participants. There is hardly anyone among today's visitors who would recall them, but arches and walls, flagstones on the floor, and stained glass windows still keep the memory. The attempt to reunite the churches failed, but there was another, quite an unexpected outcome of the council. The most eminent people of those days got together in Florence. Among them were philosophers, poets, painters, and politicians. Their public discussions, as well as the exchange of ideas, stirred up all of Europe. Among those who participated in discussions with Western philosophers, there were Greek philosophers from Constantinople who arrived to the council accompanying the Byzantine Emperor. Of them, the most outstanding figure was that of the mysterious George Gemmas Platon. In Florence, there is little known about him. We are aware that Platon was not an adherent of any specific philosophical trend. He considered himself a follower of the universal philosophia perennis, which means imperishable philosophy. He was convinced that it was followed by all outstanding doctrines and sages of the ancient world. In compliance with their ideas, the philosopher from Byzantine said that the time for the universal religion had come, that people belonging to different creeds may join in a single aspiration for the truth. Cosimo Medici took Platon's ideas to heart. The Florentine governor dispatched travelers and monks to the west, assigning them to search for ancient manuscripts. Ancient heritage from different countries started to flow to the Badia of Fiesole, the personal collection of Cosimo Medici. How, from where, and by which means ancient manuscripts got to Florence is an unsolved mystery of the Renaissance. Things that had been considered lost and forgotten long before seemed to have waited till the proper moment and came to be mysteriously brought to light again. The famous Corpus Hermeticum, the synthesis made by Egyptian priests of Master Thoth Hermes' works, Chaldean oracles, works by Plato, Plotinus and Pythagoras, Orphic hymns, poetry of Homer and Virgilius, manuscripts of Kabbalah, and those of Christian Gnostics. All these works were waiting for translation, in-depth study, returned to life. The Western world used to command this knowledge, but unfortunately lost it with the passage of time. It happened after ancient temples were destroyed, after Plato's Academy in Athens was closed, after the destructive fire in Alexandrian Library, and after the violence carried out by fanatic Christians over Hypatia, the leader of the Neoplatonic school in Alexandria. Please keep the link of chain, you, the Almighty, that's made of steps towards the eternal light, which is the faith. In 1462, there came a point of which Cosimo Medici had long dreamt of. The Florentine governor solemnly handed over an ancient Greek manuscript containing Plato's dialogues to a young scientist and theologian, Marsilio Ficino, so that he could translate the manuscript into Latin. Ficino was also granted a villa in the outskirts of Florence. That was the beginning of the famous Platonic Academy in Florence. A few years later it turned into the heart of the Renaissance. The Academy was concerned neither with the state nor with the church. It differed from the university in a sense. It was a free society of free people, enamored of imperishable philosophy and Plato. Dukes, gonfaloniers, priors, merchants, artists, all are united by a pleasant simplicity in relations, which smooths over all the distinctions of age, class, professions, which exist so that to separate people living in this world. They set a high value on friendship. It is more than just friendship. It is love, supreme love, pure spiritual relationships that can be compared to the ties of happy stars on the skies. They recognize each other by these evident signs which distinguish a genuine Neoplatonic: lofty soul, love for wisdom, divine inspiration, implementation of fair and noble acts. Villas belonging to Neoplatonic scientists were situated in the country not far from Florence. They had beautiful names such as Careggi, Diana, Belcanto, Polgiarchiano. But the passage of time leaves its trail. Winds and rains have gradually turned the formerly beautiful marble of stairs and sculptures into limestone, while they kept untouched evergreen orange trees. It seems as if these trees were taken from here to Botticelli's canvas, as if the former owners will in a second appear over the shady alley. The solitude, peace and quiet reigning here nowadays do not prevent our imagination from moving back in time to the years when Platonics gathered together in these gardens. Here, voices of the great masters of the Renaissance used to be heard. Here, the imperishable philosophy found its worthy disciples and patrons. How long would the happy times last? Would there appear people capable of continuing the noble deed and turning into new keepers and defenders of the universal truth? These questions might have been heard even at the times when Platonic Academy was in its glory and the triumph of humanism ideas seemed to be everlasting. The heart of the Academy was made of inseparable friends: Marsilio Fusino, Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, Cristoforo Landino, Angelo Poliziano, Michelangelo Buonarroti, Sandro Botticelli, Lorenzo il Magnifico. Platonics appealed to the eternal nature of man. They spoke about the search for the sense of being. They spoke about man as part of the universe, about the great journey of the human soul in eternity. That was an attempt to revert to life classic values and ideals which guided the great civilizations of the past, an attempt to restore them and make vital in the changed conditions of a new era. From mere theory, wisdom of the past had turned for them into a real example. It had turned into a lifestyle. His coarse and irregular features seemed to be carved of dark granite. They lacked any appeal. Prognathous upper jaw, a long massive nose, big dark eyes. People say that he had poor eyesight and unpleasant hoarse voice. Lorenzo Medici, Lorenzo il Magnifico, the grandson and worthy follower of Cosimo Medici. He governed Florence nobly and fairly, without any title or ranks. Monarchs from the east and the west were seeking his friendship. Despite this, there wasn't the faintest sign of arrogance in his character. In politics, Lorenzo appreciated common sense, while in everyday life esteemed courtesy and modesty. Philosophy and the arts took much more of his attention than trade flotillas or the bank empires spread all over Europe. The Florentine Academy, founded by Cosimo Medici, found in the person of Lorenzo the most powerful patron and the main participant in all its activities. Following his grandfather, Lorenzo collected antique books and manuscripts, wrote poems, read original texts in Latin and Greek. These pictures have been taken from Lorenzo's book of collected poems. He has also gone down in history as a founder of the first public library in Europe. Its collection counted more than 10,000 volumes. There had not been a library of the kind since the times of Alexandria. The unique collection is nowadays kept in Lorenziana Library at San Lorenzo Cathedral. We are cautiously turning over pages full of notes made in copybook hand. This autograph of Marsilio Ficino is more than 500 years old. Ficino was the life and soul of the Florentine Academy. People used to tell no less stories about his gentleness and cheerfulness than about his erudition. He was a poet. He brilliantly played the lyra and was a skillful doctor. People used to say that the modest philosopher personified the soul of Orpheus. Ficino translated into Latin works by Plato, as well as the greatest works of the East and the West. Due to his efforts, book printing in Florence continued developing. Scientists from all over the world came to listen to his lectures. His works were very popular around Europe. This book, Ficino devoted to Lorenzo il Magnifico, Ficino's co-thinker, patron and friend. With the help of just a few words, I want to teach you rhetoric, music and geometry. Make certain of what is fair, and you'll become an excellent orator. Restrain emotions and worries of your heart, and you'll know what music is. Estimate your abilities and capabilities, and you'll turn into a real geometer. The Renaissance spirit is hovering around this hall. Nowhere but here worked monks engaged in copying manuscripts. Who knows? Plato's dialogues might have been copied at this very table. Italian humanism absorbed not only the wisdom of ancient Greece, but also the philosophy of various traditions including ancient Kabbalah and Oriental doctrines. Pico della Mirandola was an expert on them. At the age of 27, he had a good command of 22 languages. His friends from the Academy called him Signore della Concordia, which means Sir Concord. This handsome young man from a noble family, who managed to escape from the inquisitive justice only due to Lorenzo, used to speak about the immortality of human soul, about philosophy, which is love for wisdom, stating that it is the lot, not just of a few elite, but of all the people. The universal man was an ideal of the Renaissance. This individual was longing for perfection, was eager to know and to venture upon everything, was anxious about surmounting all obstacles. He wanted to be a citizen of the world. Believe that for you there is nothing impossible. Perceive yourself as capable of getting to know everything, all arts, all sciences, and the nature of every living creature. Rise above all the peaks, descend below all the depths. Accumulate all sensations associated with created things. Rise above. Imagine that at one time you are present everywhere, on the land, in the sea, in the sky. If your thoughts manage to grasp everything at once, you'll be able to cognize the God. the ideas of humanism lighted up all spheres of life of the Renaissance man: politics, philosophy, science, and above all the arts. Like Madonna, Florence accepted the versatile genius of Quattrocenta. Those were the great times. Domenico Ghirlandaio, Sandro Botticelli, Filippo Lippi, Raphael Santi, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo Buonarroti. The great masters shared their knowledge and experience with young followers, who in a short while surpassed their teachers in everything. Here, in one of Florentine's studios, Andrea del Verrocchio asked his young apprentice, Leonardo da Vinci, to finish up an angel at Verrocchio's picture called Baptism of Christ. There he is, Leonardo's angel on the left side. Having given it a glance, Verrocchio broke his brushes. It became clear to him that his talent could never be compared to that of his apprentice. Temples, palaces and houses, streets and gardens have all embodied the history of the Renaissance. In silence, they are ready to confide their secrets to us. Behind this wall, in the gardens of San Marco Monastery, Lorenzo il Magnifico positioned his wonderful collection of ancient sculptures. Following his request, the famous sculptor Bertoldo shared his knowledge, taught his young artists in sculpture. A 15-year-old Michelangelo was amongst them. At once Lorenzo discerned his talent, of which no match had ever been seen. Lorenzo invited Michelangelo to stay in his palace. The Palace of Medici is one of the first and most famous masterpieces of Renaissance architecture. Its basement is partially made of the wall that had once surrounded the city. Nowadays, we shall not find the rooms where Michelangelo, Bertoldo and Lorenzo lived. The interior was significantly changed in the centuries that followed. Contemporaries admired the Palace of Medici, saying, "Whenever you see its lighted windows in the darkness of night, you feel as if you were in paradise." The palace used to be the place where Platonic scholars often got together. Young Michelangelo hearkened with admiration to the words of his new friends. "Listening to them, I feel myself such a fool," he once confessed to his teacher. Bertoldo smiled in response, saying, "These are the greatest master spirits of Europe. They will make you think. They will suggest great subjects for your work. Unfortunately, they cannot sculpture marble, which is as expressive language as any other." Madonna of the Stairs turned out to be the first serious work by Michelangelo. The Platonics were enraptured by the audacity of the young man, who broke medieval canons with his new vision of composition and perspective. The figure of Michelangelo's Maria is permeated with antique humanity, wisdom and generosity. You've perceived Acropolis in Florence. These were the words Marsilio Ficino uttered. There could hardly be any greater praise from the scientist who devoted all his life to the renovation of ancient tradition. For artists of the Renaissance, the return to traditions and ancient universal symbols was not a mere repetition of ideas of the past. This was their revival in new images, more comprehensible for contemporaries. The great heavenly love praised by Plato had turned into a sense and core of the Renaissance, man's life, his deeds, and highest aspirations. This love, like the summons perceived by the soul towards the eternal and divine, revealed itself in new symbols of the Renaissance. No sooner than the spring comes down with fragrant flowers, covering black soil, will you appear from the gravestone darkness to marvel all, immortal in those who die. Sandro Botticelli revives the ancient myth for his contemporaries. His Primavera is an allegory of an ancient myth, telling about the soul leaving the darkness of Hades for the daylight. Venus, heavenly love, not the earthly one, lives in the garden of life. The ancient god Erot is aiming to shoot his burning arrow at one of several beautiful graces. Ignited with the great power of love, she turns back towards the temporal vanity and points her gaze at the god Hermes Mercury, known as the Master of Wisdom, the one who knows all the secrets, who uses the magic codices to drive away clouds of ignorance. I set you in the very center of the world. I have made you neither of heaven nor of earth, neither mortal nor immortal, so that you, as though the maker and moulder of yourself, you may fashion yourself in whatever shape you shall prefer. You shall have the power to degenerate into the lowest form of life, which are brutish. You shall have the power, out of the judgment of your soul, to be reborn into the highest creatures, which are divine. Oh, what a great happiness it is for man to possess whatever he wants to, and to be whoever he wants to be. No sooner had ideas and dreams, old as the world itself, but nevertheless topical in all the times, revived in Florentines' palaces and villas, than they turned into the common property of many people. The fame of the Florentine masters spread far beyond the bounds of the Renaissance capital. The Pope and kings of different states considered it an honor to invite sculptors and architects from Florence, so that they brought the Pope and king's ideas to life. We have dug this art up from under the ground, or even more, we got it from heaven, wrote another titan of the Renaissance, architect Alberti. Within just a few decades, the capital of the Renaissance accumulated its countless treasures. It turned into a huge art studio where everyone contributed his or her talent. Florentines used to build palaces and temples, abbeys and hospitals, without stinting in love and aid to those who needed them. They were proud of their orphanage situated on Santissima Annunziata Square. That was the first orphans' home in Europe. Moreover, it was projected by none but the most famous Florentine architect, Filippo Brunelleschi. The square itself was also his creature. Edged with Greek porticos, it later on turned into a new model for numerous courtyards and loggias created in Florence. It was much later that Brunelleschi erected the celebrated dome of Santa Maria del Fiore, the symbol of the Renaissance and of Florence itself. Santa Maria del Fiore, or Holy Mary of the Flower. Doesn't it look like a grateful remembrance about the first patroness of the city, Divine Flora? The majestic dome masterfully rose above old feudal towers and the ocean of houses. The 15th century, the brightest and the most mysterious period of Italian Renaissance, is called Quattrocento. Though many dreams of the Florentines have not yet come true, Florence of the Quattrocento was able to live in future as well as in present. By that time it had already faced the Golden Age. Girolamo Savonarola came to Florence on Lorenzo's invitation. Initially, his public speeches against the church, stiffed in dogmas, did not contradict the ideas of humanism. Having settled in San Marco Abbey, the monk soon showed his true worth. He turned out to be not only a severe critic of the church, but of all the beauty that appeared during the Renaissance as well. He proclaimed the works of the great masters to be the shameless outcome of sin, and Lorenzo il Magnifico to be the initiator of Florence's moral degradation. Savonarola's ardent and eloquent sermons attracted more and more worshippers. San Marco became too small for the Dominican, so he started preaching in Santa Maria del Fiore. Savonarola urged people to set fire to works of art and books. He insisted on expatriating Medici from Florence, trying to override everyone to his own world outlook. Catastrophe was hovering over the air. Lightning struck the torch of the dome. A wolf was howling in the city. Rumors spread about Lorenzo's illness, making people wait in alarm for his death, for the end of the Republic, for the end of this century, for the end of times. Savonarola's appeal to overall penitence aggravated the atmosphere of hysteria, giving rise to doubts and confusion in hearts and minds. Only a few students attended the lectures in the Platonic Academy. Florentine printers refused to print anything without Savonarola's approval. Lorenzo the Splendid was one of those few who realized what was going on. Destructive forces always follow in the tracks of creation. Each epoch gives birth to its wonderful flower, which is art. Time passes, and you see that the flower has already been broken or burnt. At times, destructors are your former friends who used to share your concerns a few days before. But the time will come, and the flower will blossom out afresh. The death of Lorenzo il Magnifico became the end of the Quattrocento. A few years later, Savonarola was judged and doomed to the stake. While Florence faced tough times, there came a period of mental restraint, intrigues, plots, and crime. The majestic capital of the Renaissance sank into the sopor of a small state. This is just like the cover of night descending over the city on the Arno. But the sunset is always followed by the sunrise. The power of light born in Florence was so strong that it turned into a new daybreak for all of Europe. Despite all the fires of Inquisition in different corners of the Old World, there appeared groups of people inspired by the ideas of antiquity and humanism. They challenged the old life and suggested new ways in art, science, religion and politics. The Renaissance continued until the 17th century and revealed such geniuses as Albrecht Dürer, William Shakespeare, Nicholas Copernicus, Paracelsus, Thomas More, Erasmus of Rotterdam, and Giordano Bruno. Those who have faith neither in God nor in His signs are not aware of people who embody the destiny, although the entire history of humanity evolved due to them. None but these people make dreams, which seemed unrealizable, come true. They show us the way of hope and action. Nowadays, recalling the Renaissance geniuses, we'll probably understand or feel what was the message the stars, embodied in people, wanted to deliver. our contemporaries praised us to the skies, they understood little of us. In our century, we were pilgrims from other times and heralds of the future. No one recognized us. A distant star guided us through our incarnations. We descended so that to show the great law of the revival. Everything in the huge universe passes away so that to revive again. Be it a flower or a star, a demon or an angel, people or gods. If you want to regenerate, if you believe in immortality, look up at the blossoming of heavenly bodies. The world once saw the Renaissance. What is important today is that there is an opportunity to revive again. Project Coordinator, Delia Steinberg-Guzman. Project Director, Elena Sikoric. Screenplay, Ilya Buzukashvili. Director and Cameraman, Maxim Ladigin. Composer, Vyacheslav Sezhanov. Sound Directors, Tatiana Savinova, Vasily Krashkovsky. Sound Editors, Yulia Morozova, Ilya Buzukashvili. Design, Maxim Klimov. Director's Assistants, Ekaterina Ladigina. Photographer, Alexei Konovalov. Text Editor, Olga Numova. Translator, Natalia Pekaskaya. Narrator, Jason Sandy. General Producer, Andrei Buchan. Idea, Screenplay, Artistic Direction by New Acropolis.